Here's a question for you. How do organizations keep their human soul while using AI? This is the big thing that everybody's going through right now. We're cutting people left and right. We're letting people go. But somewhere in there, we have to keep our human soul. This is what we're going to be talking about today with Robin Daniels. He's the CDO of Zensai. Hey, I'm Sherry Winn, your podcast host, two-time Olympian, national championship basketball coach, and author of The Olympic Code. So, Robin, why don't you tell people a little bit more about yourself before getting this too deep? I just want them to know you at a deeper level. So if there's something that people should know about you, what would that be?
Well, first of all, it's good to see you again, Sherry. You've always been one of my favorite people and a huge inspiration to me, truly. We've known each other for many years now, and just you always show up when it matters the most. I've spent my life, over 25 years, really at the forefront of technology, really working on, I think, some of the issues and the topics that matter most. I worked at Salesforce, LinkedIn, Box, WeWork, Matterport. I've taken a few companies public, and I've always tried to kind of go beyond what I thought was possible, kind of take my life and my career to another level. And of course, again, you've been a huge inspiration in helping me do that as well as an awesome coach. And now I'm the chief business officer at a company called Zensai. And we're really all about one thing. How do we unlock performance for people and organizations, especially in this age of AI? That's my mission. We're a 200-person company. We're globally distributed, and we just kind of work with millions of people all around the world to make that happen. We really focus on selling our platform to companies around the world who think about how do we want to level up. That's basically what we're all about.
Oh, that's beautiful. And so one of the things you've done recently is you've written a book to help with that. It's called the Human Playbook. Is that correct? The Human Playbook. And so this is really about helping people figure out, we've got AI's not going to go away. It's here. It's probably going to grow. How do we connect people in such a way that they still feel important and validated and valued while using AI? Because we're more and more dependent on AI. And so people think, well, now we can cut the human piece out of it. And I'm like, no, there's still a human piece in this, right?
Absolutely.
Because you lose your soul. You lose your soul when you do that. So talk a little bit about this book that you've just written.
I mean, it's probably, so myself and my two co-authors, Nina, who's the Chief Human Success Officer, and Rasmus, who's the CEO, we co-wrote a book called the Human Success Playbook. And it's basically based on hundreds of conversations that we've had with customers, with VCs, with investors, with just everyday leaders that we meet with who are in our networks. It's the most urgent conversation of our time, is how will AI and humans coexist successfully in a way that keeps the soul of the company, but also of the people, of course, that they work with. We firmly want to be on the side of history that says use AI as a superpower to invest in people's skills and potential and invest in the growth of a company versus a lot of the headlines which are around cost cutting and efficiency and getting rid of people because AI can do the job better and faster and so on. Is that true in some cases? Of course it is. Like in any technological shift, there's always going to be disruption. I'm not naive enough to think that's not going to happen, but I also firmly believe that what we're seeing with AI being able to unlock amazing potential and free up so much of the innate possibilities that I think we all as humans really do have. For example, so much of our time in any company is spent on work that maybe doesn't really add that much value. Admin work or coordination or reporting or whatever it is. Think about if you could free up 30 or 50% of your time, and instead of just thinking about that as a cost-cutting exercise, but thinking about it as a way of actually adding to the potential that every human being on the planet have. We're all innately creative. We all have opportunity to go and think about new ways of solving challenges. I think in essence, when you do work every day, it's really about solving challenges. Sometimes those challenges are small and sometimes those are big. And they can be, a lot of people, I've heard them say, oh, I'm not really creative. I don't know what that means. Actually, creativity is not about paintings or numbers or beautiful colors. Creativity can come in many different ways. Like, how do you solve challenges? You see a problem in this process, and friction here, the way we reach out to customers, the way our HR systems. There's so many ways of solving challenges. If you can unlock that creativity in people, just think about what a different place your company be. So we wrote this book, just to kind of make a long story short, to try to answer that urgent question of how will humans and AI coexist. And we wrote it honestly as a narrative, based again on hundreds of these conversations. So it starts out with a CEO who's being asked by his board and investors to cut 40% of the company. And guess what? If you look at any headline today, this is basically the headlines you'd read every single day. It's
Right.
in every newspaper now, right? So this is like not just some fiction. This is basically based on what we are seeing in the conversation we have. So the CEO in this book gets the question, or gets the mandate to cut 40% of the company
Right.
to be more efficient, and he refuses to. He says, "No, I'm gonna prove to you that there's a better way. And give me 6 months to show that actually using AI as a potential for greater output, productivity, growth of the business is a much better choice. Let's show that investing in people actually matters." And so it's written as this narrative, kind of like the hero's journey, you Luke Skywalker-ish, and it's got this narrative tension of a ticking clock that's, and if he doesn't succeed, he's going to get fired, right? And then three heroes show up like in any good, story to help our CEO on the journey. And one of those heroes is me,
Yay!
or a version of me.
Well, it's better that you're a hero than a villain. Let's just say that. We want you to be the hero rather than the villain.
Exactly.
Well, that's great. I mean, let's dive into this because I think that most people right now are like, humans aren't going to be essential. We're not going to be necessary anymore. We don't need humans. And I think this is kind of, if we go backwards to the time when we had this industrial revolution and people used to go out to their fields, and so they were hoeing, they were physically picking the weeds, they were physically picking the plants, whatever it was, they were physically like they were doing all this stuff, and they were like, oh man, this is going to be the end, like there's not going to be any more jobs, people can't work, and it's going to just kill us. But it didn't. Like we evolved to another level. So in what ways, like in your book even, in what ways did you, the hero, figure out that we can increase like the use of human productivity, that we can keep our people and that we can use the people in a different manner?
It requires a lot of rethinking about everything. Like we have to kind of first get rid of some of the old dogmas or thinking around how we're set up ourselves, how we organize ourselves, the way we use technology as well. I mean, the thing about AI that's so wonderful is that the dream that we've had a long time, I think, in many companies is to organize around skills, right? And it's like, let's focus on the skills that people have, no matter the level, that we need to make projects successful. But that sounds great on paper, but then what happens in most companies is they go back to doing what they've always done, which is organize around hierarchy. Right? You go into most companies, they're organized around a hierarchy. There's a CEO, and there's a C-level, and a VP layer, and blah, 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 right? And then information kind of flows that way. And in the new way of thinking, like you organize around projects, and you organize around the skills needed to have the project succeed. And you see more and more companies starting to have that thinking. So the first kind of thing that we go through in the book is you have to organize yourself differently. The old way of organization it's too slow for the age of AI. And information now can be had much quicker by every level. You don't have to have it filtered through all these humans, right? Which oftentimes can lead to a lot of bureaucracy and slowness and all kinds of things. So think about the way you organize.
Power mongering. So right now the power, because there's certain people that want to hold on to the power.
That's right.
And so when they hold on to the power, they become the bottleneck. So that becomes that's the slowing down of things. That's human. That's human. Like, we hold on. We've got, if I get my power away, then I'm not important. That's a human problem, a human condition. Yes. So tell me more.
And even that, what you just said, I found myself sometimes falling into that trap, and it's that. So the first kind of thing that we guide the CEO on is as he's reshaping his organization is, okay, well, think about reshaping your organization from being kind of traditionally a pyramid shape to be much more of a diamond shape. And what does that mean, being a diamond shaped organization? So so this is about, you organize yourself. A lot of the people who have the right skills with the right time for the projects that you need to succeed. So will you have some junior level members? Of course you will. We have some mid-level managers and people who have skills. And it's not about managing people. Now it's about managing the projects and the outputs of those projects. And then forming kind of these groups around the projects that you need to have happen. Let's say there's a go-to-market project, or there's a revamping of our HR, policies, or the way that we organize ourselves and how we do outreach to customers, or whatever it is. And it becomes much more around organizing around those things. There's probably some baseline things you still have to have in an organization that are kind of steady state. But then if you're thinking about all the things that a company usually does, it's usually around project-based, right? There's like these projects that have to happen. And the goal is really like, now it's all about how do you use AI to enable those projects. And it's hard to give an answer of what technology to use because it's so different per project, of course.
Right.
But then you find the right technology to enable that project. The technology that a marketing team would use is very different than a finance team or an HR team. Some of it might be universal, but they're usually very different as well. But then you augment the humans who have the skills to make a project happen, the experience to see what needs to be done with the right technology. So the first thing is about the organization, but that requires courage from a CEO to go in and kind of blow up the old organizational structure, which is like
huge courage.
It has a lot,
huge courage.
Has a lot of ego around it, and a lot of people like relying on this, like you said, sense of self-worth, right, around like how many people do you have reporting to you and so on, right? Is that really what's going to matter in the future? I mean, not really. I mean, so it requires you to organize yourself differently, and there are many ways.
So for me, from my coaching perspective, right? So I hear this, and the first thing I hear is like, and you said the word ego. So how do you? Because this is not just about moving people to a new place. It's about getting them to change their thinking, and that's a lot deeper. Yes, right? That's a lot deeper because you've got all these belief systems, you have all these fears, you have people, every single person when we're talking about AI, it's like, what about me? What about me? What about me? Right? It's always in what's going to happen to me? What about me? That's right. And then we have all the human behaviors that we know are, when you're run through the ego, you're run through insecurity. So how, so in this, like, it's almost like you, in my viewpoint, it's almost like you have to not just think about the reorganization of how we're going to do it, but how we're going to get people to literally become somebody different. Like they have to be willing to have this new inner dialogue about who they are and where their worth comes from. And so how do you do that? Because one part is this organization, the AI and stuff, and that's like not delving into this human person, like this human individual that you see and I see, and that we know with all the people that I've coached, it always comes down to what happened to them, what trauma happened to them, they've never gotten over, were they bitter, were they unwilling to go because of something in the past, they're afraid they take the past into the present moment. You have all that stuff going on. So how do you, when you're in an organization like you are, how do you get those people to get in that direction as well as the new AI direction?
It's, to me, it comes back to the reward system you set up around this. I mean, so if everything else stays the same, it'll probably fail. So you have to rethink everything. It starts with like thinking about, I think, the reorganization of the company in some ways around projects and skills, but then everything else kind of follows on that. So for example, you have to reward people probably differently in this world, and you have to kind of figure out what the best way is. I think, so many companies talk about just rewarding outcomes, and outcomes is just a part of it. But what about the inputs and the outputs as well? What I mean is, the inputs are the things that you control 100%. The way you show up, the way you lean into a project, the way you collaborate, communicate, the energy you give to something, the passion you give to something, all the stuff that I think you and I have chatted about a long time. Like, start rewarding that as well. So it's not just about the end result as well, because I think that can lead to a lot of toxic behaviors. And so you start rewarding that, and maybe that's part of the comp plan, maybe that's part of their promotional path, maybe it's part of their development path as well, so on. But until you start actually rewarding that, then a lot of things will usually stay the same, because people try to hoard power, like you just said, or information, right? So you have to start rewarding that in a different way. But that also, again, requires courage, because something that means that it just kind of changes the power dynamic in a company potentially. The second thing is rewarding output. And what I mean by an output is these things that you end up delivering or producing. Could be, again, a new marketing program, a new HR policy, a new sales program, a new way of reporting your finances, whatever it is, right? Start rewarding those things if they're like really succeeding in doing what you intended it to do. And again, you have to figure out like how to do that. And then of course you can still reward outcomes, which I think is important, because you do want to set up a goal of being accountable to something.
Right.
But it can't just be being accountable to the outcome, because we also know, I think you and I have been doing this long enough, that you can't control that at the end of the day anyway. You can impact it, influence it, you can set a direction towards it, but you can't ultimately control. You can just control the variables that are within your sphere, the way you show up every day, the strategy, the effort, the communication, the training, all the stuff that
the attitude,
right? The attitude, all those things, right? You control. So, but if you don't reward that, nothing's going to change, I think, at all either, because it's going to bounce back to kind of what it's always been, right?
Yeah.
And then you have like the strongest person in the room, the most senior person with the most senior title, end up kind of dominating that, which I've seen too many times. And that doesn't really work, because what we're seeing also now with AI kind of democratizes access to information in many ways. You still have the beauty of, I think, seniority is there's a pattern recognition that you get from that. So you still have to have somebody lead a team, a project, whatever it is, because there has to be some kind of level of cohesiveness in somebody. But then within that, everyone is more or less equal. And that's, I think, the big change that you have. I'm not saying that you get rid of like all hierarchies. I think that's a little bit unrealistic, but you kind of organize. So you say, here's a leader who has good pattern recognition, good communication skills, good team leadership skills, good motivation skills. They become kind of the team lead for this project. And then we assemble a group of people, maybe that's 3, 5, 10, 100 people around whatever it is that we're trying to do. And then we focus on what this organization around that. That becomes much more impactful, I think, in the future, because then you can also use AI as a lever on top of that, kind of nearly as extra team members in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of things that AI can do for you. I agree with you about you still have to have somebody who's willing to lead, but not lead from I know everything, I'm the expert. It's not that leadership. The leadership is coordinating, how are we working together, and then we got the human behaviors, because you always have the human behaviors that are mixed in. So, if you're a leader, you can't allow somebody to not collaborate, for example, to hoard their information. You have to be the person who says, let's coordinate these pieces and what pieces can you do? But the leader also has to be the person who says, let me hear from you. That's a great idea. Yes, I agree. I was on the wrong path. You've got the better direction. Let's listen to what Robin just said. I mean, so the leader has to be able to do that. And what happens anytime you get a group of people together, you still have to be able to work and play well together. The problem is that people don't, they come with a lot of background information, like a lot of background drama, trauma, whatever you want to say. And most people, I like to talk about emotional intelligence, and people say it's a soft skill. Well, I know it's not a soft skill, it's a necessary skill. And for me, as you're talking about this, I'm like, this is something that more and more companies should invest in, is this emotional intelligence of their people, so that moving forward, they can do what you're suggesting. I think if people haven't worked on their emotional intelligence, the battle you're going to have with people about, the change that's necessary to overcome their fears about this, to step aside and say, I'm the CEO of a company, but I don't have to be I don't have to have everybody feeding up to me. Like, we can do it a little bit differently. I'm the CEO, and there's going to be other people, but it's not going to be like you're the only person who knows, and we've got to run everything through you. It's going to, that's going to take a lot of courage, as you mentioned earlier. This courage for people, and then getting past their own insecurities, because everybody's worried about, with AI, everybody's worried about what's this look like for me? Am I going to be important anymore? Are my old skills not going to carry me forward into the new world? Possibly it's true. So that means you've got to up your game. And a lot of people get in their comfort zone. They're like, oh no, I'm in my comfort zone. I cannot leave it.
It's also interesting. I think of it this way. I think it's exactly right what you just said. I've seen this play out over and over again. I think AI, especially now, what we're seeing in the last couple of years, AI will disrupt everything to do with hard skills, but not soft skills. It's not even close, right? I mean, it's like you go into a room and you can feel the tension, right? Will AI be able to do that, to understand the pattern of how to get people to work together and see there's something going on here, right? Or read the body language and so on, right? Will this happen over time? Maybe. I think we're pretty far from it. The other thing also I think about is that IQ used to be able to get you in the door, and then EQ would get you ahead, right? But I think we've seen, and I think even that now is actually getting flipped fairly quickly as well. It's like more and more companies are looking for, because they know that, hey man, if this person has great communication skills, collaboration skills, energy, AI can help actually just enhance that in many ways in their intelligence. But even the skills to do a functional job these days, especially in the white collar world, I mean, they're being disrupted so fast. If you're a lawyer or a marketer or whatever it is that you do, right? It's like, okay, that moat that you used to have, that moat. I mean, it's like, I think about the legal profession. I have a lot of lawyers in my family, and they're I mean, they speak such an arcane language, and I read some legal contracts. I feel like my head's about to explode. And like now I can upload a contract to Claude, and I can instantly get like, tell me what this means in human language. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, I know.
it's
Absolutely.
like it's the other concept really in the book that's related to kind of how you organize is you then have to. We call this kind of the human success score. I mean, it's of course the human success playbook. So we've come up with something called the human success score, which is really about how do you then measure that the things that you're doing and the investment in people is paying off. Because this has been one of the challenges, I think, for the longest time, honestly. If you speak to most CEOs, and I would love to get your take on it, but if you speak to most CEOs and you ask what matters most in your company, they all say, our people. And then I say, well, what are you doing to invest in your people? And then they oftentimes kind of pause and they don't really have a great answer. And they go back to doing what they've always done, which is chase growth and profit at all costs.
Right,
And the
right.
reason is because it's not because they don't care, but they don't know how an investment in people is going to lead to more profitability, more growth, whatever it is that
Absolutely.
they're chasing. And so one of the things that we're trying to solve for is that unless you can actually measure it, it'll never really be taken seriously by a board, the investors, by the CEO, a CFO, right, who's a hard nose, like numbers person. And so you have to figure that out. So we give kind of a formula in the book as well of how you can measure that. Like we think it's based on kind of three core factors. And it's based on your rate of learning. We know skills get outdated insanely quickly, especially now. When I used to work at LinkedIn, we did a study that said that within 5 years, over 90% of your skills are outdated. And this is from 2018 or so. I can
Wow.
imagine here. I can imagine here in 2026, it's probably outdated within like 2 or 3 years. It's not irrelevant, but it gets outdated very quickly, especially the hard skills, right? The soft skills I think are a little bit
Right.
more universal, but the hard skills that you know about how to do something gets outdated quickly. So your rate of learning, your ability to absorb new information,
Mm.
so you can actually perform better and better and better. Again, you've been an Olympic coach, right? I mean, you know this. How people learn new tactics or how to do new things just helps them. And if they get stuck in the same way of like doing things that we 10 years ago, it's just not. So that's number one. Number two is, do you have clarity around the goals that you have that you need to achieve and your team needs to achieve? And how often are you holding yourself and your team accountable to hitting those goals, right? And it's shocking if you go into most. I saw a statistic. I was giving a presentation in LA about a month ago, and I was doing some research around this. And I found a statistic that said that 92% of employees in companies don't understand their goals, what they're measured against. I'm just like, well,
What?
how are you supposed to do great work if you don't know what you're even fighting for, right? Best, it leads to subpar results and kind of like not great outcomes. At worst, it leads to these very toxic environments because suddenly it becomes every person for themselves and I'm going to do what's best for me at the expense of everybody. So it requires that you have clarity, because then when you have clarity of what you're trying to do and the goals that you're trying to achieve and the direction you're heading, then you can also tailor your skills growth and your learning and development towards that, of course, as well.
Right.
And you can kind of measure, put those together. And then the final thing is, which matters maybe more than anything, it can sound soft, but it's maybe the most important, is how you work well together with others. Everything you do in a company always happens in a team work. Sometimes it's you and one other person, sometimes it's you and lots of other people. But this team dynamic really matters because it provides better performance, but also this sense of belonging. And we know that from all the research out there, from Gallup and McKinsey and so on, that happier employees, people who feel a sense of belonging, feel they're part of a group, they just do better work every day. And so if you really want to unleash the potential of your people, you also have to figure out how to make that team dynamic happen. Because we've also seen the opposite. If it's a very dysfunctional team, they'll do work, but is it going to be great work? Not really. And so those three here, we think you measure each of these kind of individually, but then you put them together. And once you put them together, then you can kind of do let's say a median of those three scores, and that gives you your human success score. And that then gets tied back to your rate of growth, but maybe not, instantly. But if you see, let's say over every month, if you measure this every month over a year and you see this trending in the right direction, the goal is to tie that back to how your growth as a company is going, right? So you should be able to see that, and that becomes part of that story in the book. And if the team dynamics don't work or the performance is not there, then your outcomes will suffer.
This is exactly one of the things I do, right? Because it's really important to understand that the talent is important, but what is more important is, can you get that talent to work together? So
Right.
I learned that early in my, long before my coaching career started, but when I was first a coach, and I called my dad and I was like, Dad, man, what offense do we run? And because he was a former coach, and he goes, well, it doesn't matter. What do you mean it doesn't matter? Of course it matters what offense you run. Are you crazy? He's like, no, no, no. What really matters is, can you get the team to run the offense together? The offense itself is not important as can you get those players to play well together? And so I thought, well, yeah, sure. That's the easy part. The most challenging thing I did for 23 years in my coaching was figuring out how to get a group of people to play together when they all had a different role. Right. And so you had people that had the bigger role that got interviewed by they were on television, they got interviewed for newspapers, and they got all the attention. They had people that might have started in the starting five, but they just weren't as dominant. They still had a really important role. Then you had people coming off the bench who were subs, and then you had people that didn't get to play much. And everybody had to feel like they contributed in such a way that was important. And you had to battle what mom and dad told them was important. This is what the team dynamics were important. And there was a lot of things that went into that. There was a constant, what people didn't understand, I think, and we did a lot of, was the first half of the season is really the focus was on the skill set, the physical skill set. The second half of the season was focused on everything else, like the emotional places we were, how we're going to play together, the mental things. And we spent a lot of time in the locker room doing things that other teams didn't do. Right. Yeah. I mean, I would figure out we're not, is it we're not playing well because we're lacking the skill, or is it not playing well because we're not there where we need to be mentally? Are we not playing well because we have a bunch of people that don't want to play together? Like, the silliest things in the world. Like, she stole my French fry, so I'm not going to pass her the ball. I'm like,
it's hilarious.
What? So these are the things that you don't understand, but that's the same dynamic that you have going into companies. Like I'm working with a company right now, and spent a lot of time with them, at a live workshop. Love this stuff. They're like, oh, we love this stuff. And they go, we need you back. I said, what do you need me back for? Because here's the deal, is they need to know how, like, they get it, but how do we consistently implement it in such a way that it makes a difference? Totally. And that's where the leadership really comes in. So when we're talking about leadership skills, is that you have to hold people accountable for their behavior. So you can't just lay out, this is how we're all going to behave, and everybody does it like that. That's what some people think. We're going to come up with all these great values and principles, and everybody's just going to join in, and we're going to totally. No, you have to be willing to have the hard conversations, and I like to call them victorious conversations. But you have to be willing to have the conversations. You have to be willing to hold people accountable. You can't let people become a dysfunction, because then the dysfunction is running the team. Right.
I remember I was at WeWork, and I had two leaders. I had a team of about 400 people who worked for me, and I had two leaders, both SVPs, and they had big teams under them, and they just did not get along at all. And it was so apparent to the team, right? And everybody, there was just this tension and lots of missed opportunities because these two leaders didn't get along. And then it spilled into their teams, of course, right? And I brought them into a room together, and we'd hey, we have to work on this because it's affecting the culture of the team, and everyone's seeing it and feeling it. And we spent an hour and a half, 2 hours talking about this, and then they kind of grudgingly agreed and said, okay, we'll agree to work better together. But I could just tell they were sitting arms crossed. Their energy was not there. And I said, we're not leaving this room until we kind of come up with a working rhythm, because they're saying things because they probably just want to get out of that room. But I'm like, this matters the most. This is not just a nice to have. This is ultimately what matters the most. What's interesting is we have the World Cup coming now, right? And I love the World Cup. It's super fun. And we also always see this dynamic play out, right? We have some teams who have the best players in the world on every position, and they just can't play together, and they end up losing, right? We've seen it time and again. And then we've got these little teams who nobody ever heard of, or these small countries that they're underdogs, and then they're because they figured out the teamwork. And I'm really curious, I don't know if you followed the World Cup, but any takes on this? What have you seen inside, your career?
Yeah, I don't really follow the World Cup as much, but it's true. I mean, it's always that dynamics of people playing together. It's always that, I mean, you're working with a kind of a fragile ecosystem, right? The fragility of that. Yeah. And so, when somebody can, it's I had a player once, and she made this comment, I'm still laughing about it. She goes, I'm sorry about it, don't regret it. And I'm like, well, that's not really, that's not.
What's that even mean? It's very passive aggressive.
That's what, you're talking about those two people who need to work together. And they're like, well, we have to do it, but we really don't want to do it. And so we really, I really still hate him. I still think he's this or that. And you have to be able to get beyond that. And so really this human condition that we're too often conditioned as human beings about, our protecting our department, protecting our family, our. Like we have all this, protection mechanisms that come on and survival mechanisms that hit into that. And it's really, for me, it's like the people that are the best, Robin, that I've worked with, the people who are willing to look into themselves. Like they're willing to say, I do that. How do I get rid of this thing? I'm working with a leader right now. And so she recognized, she used to say, I'm sorry all the time. Even if it wasn't her problem. I'm sorry. I said, how does that diminish first you? You're telling yourself, I'm sorry. What is that message you're giving to yourself? And then how does that diminish you in front of other people? Because they're hearing you all the time, saying you're not good enough. That's what it means. I'm not good enough. How does that change the dynamics between you and them? So she's been able to because she recognized it was something that was harming her ability to lead her people, and she's made the changes. And because she made the changes, she's now got a more cohesive unit and people who are willing to they don't see her kind of as a patsy because you're like, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. Well, then nobody's gonna believe that you can do it. Right? But I think this is the thing is that people don't, they have to realize they're doing something that's harming themselves and their team, and then B, they have to be willing to do something about it.
Totally. I think it's good. I had one of the earliest lessons I learned was I was doing some coaching for me, right? And my team, we were doing a lot of travel, and we had an expert come in and give us some pointers around how do we level up our communication in these kind of meetings that we had. And one thing that always kind of stood out to me was she said, if you're ever late to a meeting, just don't come in and just start apologizing profusely. It just sets the tone in a weird way. It's much better just go in and come if you're 5 or 10 minutes late, say, hey, thank you for being patient. Thank you for waiting for me. Let's get going, right? It's just it's instant, that little hack. And I've used it so often. There's instead of you coming in, because then you're already at a somewhat of a power disadvantage or an ego disadvantage, right? It's suddenly because now you're the one who screwed up, right? Instead of just saying, hey, now, but if you turn around and say, thank you for waiting and so on, appreciate that. It instantly puts them in the mind frame of, hey, it's okay, we're in this together and so on. So it's just these small things. But coming back to AI, and if you think most people don't have clarity around the goals that they need to achieve, think about how that works with AI, right? So AI is based on the clarity you give it. Right. And so if you don't have clarity yourself, how are you going to give clarity to AI? Because if you don't do, then the result is going to come back with this fairly subpar. That's why the skills around leadership are more important than ever around being able to communicate clearly. Think about if you're writing an extensive prompt, right, for Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot. The more information you can give it, the more directive you can be, the more specific. The better the outcome will be than versus giving it some generic. You'll get something back. I've done this too. I think we all have done it at some point. Right. Ask it for something generic, and it comes back with something that sounds fairly good, fairly plausible, and then you end up looking through it and it's it doesn't really say anything. Hey, give me 3 hooks for LinkedIn posts that I should do, and it comes back, oh yeah, great, and it sounds good enough that it goes okay, but then you read through it and this is kind of crap. It's just, it doesn't really work, right? But the more specific you are, and it's the same with if you think about the projects that you have to achieve every single day, the more specific you are around something, the better the outcome will be. And so those skills of communication, clarity, collaboration, directiveness, what you're expecting, I think becomes more important than ever, and both in a team environment, but also when you're working with AI as a adjunct to that, because it becomes the superpower of it can do so much work for you in terms of just stuff that maybe you can't even do, or would take you forever. And this is just a great way of unlocking that potential, because I think what we see with humans still, and again, of course, it's going to change over time as AI gets better, but is that when you give people the freedom and the trust and the psychological safety, they can come up with insanely great ideas that you had never even thought of to grow the business in new ways, right? And what AI does, if you ask it kind of a similar thing, is it'll come back from all the data that it has and it kind of tries to predict what it is that you're trying to want to do based on what it knows. But I've rarely seen it be truly breakthrough. I mean, I think about all the the promises that were made around AI when we first kind of took off a few years ago around solving cancer, curing cancer, and solving world peace and so on. We still haven't. I mean, it's been used very effectively to solve much smaller things, right?
Sure.
Like go to market and outreach and
Yep.
how to do reporting better and all kinds of stuff, right? But it still also shows just the complexity of a lot of the things that we actually work on a daily basis. And will it get better? Of course it will. Of course it will. And so AI, some people I think have seen the title of the book and thought, is AI like the enemy? AI is definitely not the enemy. What's the enemy really in the book is like ignorance or the status quo. Thinking that you're going to succeed in doing the same thing that you've always done, or thinking that ignorance, that you can bury your head in the sand and not use this. This does become the game changer for companies who will succeed or not succeed. And It's not to replace people, but it's to use it as that augmentation for humans.
Right. So the final question I have for you is how do you, what is the most important leadership skills that's going to happen now within this AI powered world? What do we need? I mean, like I look at the world and our leaders have a lot of problems.
Yeah, I know.
But in terms of like companies, what's going to be the most important leadership skill that, in your book maybe, or maybe in your experience, what is that skill going to be?
Courage. I would say courage is number one. And that can come in many different forms. Courage should be on the right side of history. First of all, I think when I see those headlines about people just being laid off because of AI, it just kind of pisses me off. I think it's a lack of courage at the top to not say, hey, again, I get it sometimes. I've had to lay off people, and I've also been on the side of layoff. It's tough. There's no doubt about it. Layoffs are acceptable if you're just fighting for survival. Then yes, of course, you might sometimes have to make that choice. But if you're like doing well as a company and you're sitting on lots of cash, then use that cash and that leverage to actually invest in people and their skills and their growth. I mean, everyone has immense potential. So for example, the easy one to point out is Oracle laying off 30,000 people, and they're sitting in boatloads of cash. You're saying that all those 30,000 people don't have great ideas or could actually learn new skills? Give them 6 months. Take some of that cash you're sitting on. Right. But they lack courage because they're so beholden to shareholders, I think. So it's courage is a key thing, but courage can also be in just going in and blowing up your team a little bit and organizing yourself differently. Again, many leaders are worried about that for the reasons we talk about, ego or upsetting the apple cart or whatever it is, right? It's like, what will it do to my director or this VP or whatever it is who feel like, and so you have to be able to have those conversations that, hey, Susan, you're great and you have a team of 3 people here, but your skill has always been really good here. And now we're going to focus on these projects. I'm going to take some of these people and focus them on some other things, but I'm going to put you here. It's not going to take anything away from the value you bring, but the way we organize ourselves. Right. So having the courage to have those kind of conversations based on what's best for the outcome that you're seeking, I think is really cool. And then I think lean into the soft skills is kind of what I'm advising a lot of people right now. I'd love to hear, again, turning it back to you, what you're advising, but I think the soft skills are going to be more important than ever.
That's where I think that 2 things you're saying is like, look, a lot of people say, what's most important? They say our people, and then they lay a bunch off. Yeah. No, not really. If it was really your people, you're going to try to find ways to help those people evolve and to remain in your company. Because what you're really saying is people are important until money.
Exactly.
Right? Until money comes to play.
Exactly.
And you can have both. You can have both, right? And at the top is really, if you're really concerned about your people, then it needs to be concerned about your people.
Exactly.
And not just the outcome. You're looking at the people. But investing in, what I would say, there's a lot of companies who do this already, and they're phenomenal. I mean, I work for companies who, they're investing in their people. They're investing in growing their people. So they're investing in bringing in outside experts, investing in, a lot of times when they'll hire me, they'll buy a bunch of my books, and then they go through the book with the team. I mean, they're investing in their continual growth, because it's always about, like, at the end of the day, if you want to be successful, you grow your people, because your people are your business, right? That's the end of the day. So, well, Robin, I know that people might want to contact you. Like, I'm thinking, man, this is a guy that really can help your company and help your company understand moving forward. How can you empower your people to empower your company to stay in this AI, in this AI-led world, AI-empowered world? So how can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not hard to find. Robin Daniels. Just go search for me. You can also find me on Zensai.com if you want, or you can find me at robindaniels.co. That's my personal website where you can also contact me if you want. But I'm always available to chat. Happy to. This is my passion and mission in life, is to fight for a world where humans have value and can really thrive. So I know you share the same passion, Sherry. So yeah, that's how you find me.
Awesome. Hey, everybody, this is the Olympic Minds Leadership Beyond Limits. And so I want to ask you, if you enjoyed this conversation, that you share this to other people, you subscribe to the channel, and come back again. So, hey, everybody, have a winning day, and we'll see you soon.